This is your Marijuana Cultivation Cannabis Podcast. We're broadcasting from James A. Garfield Studios. I am so glad you are here. Last episode, we went over a high-level list of items and ideas that you might want to have going into your first cannabis grow, as well as some things that I wished I would have known. In listening back to the episode, I realized I left a couple things out, so we'll finish up those couple of things to finish off our high-level bird's eye view of what you might need for growing cannabis. Expect in future episodes for a more granular look at these topics like seed selection, odor control, newts, soil versus cocoa, etc. So expect some fun episodes, some fun guests coming in the near future to cover those topics even more thoroughly. After we do that, we are going to take our first week of listener email questions. Remember to let me know at contactmcc@gmail.com what I messed up during the episode, as well as any questions you may have. I'll do my best to read them during a podcast. You can get my feedback, whatever guest I may have, if I have a guest, and you'll get a chance for those in the Marijuana Cultivation Cannabis Podcast world. We'll get a chance to hear it as well and send in their answers. So, with that being said, let's get started on what we missed from last week. I intended to talk about the different newts that you need, and I ended up going into the brand names of soil and cocoa instead, so I apologize for that. When it comes to your nutrition, again, kind of like with the grow equipment, there isn't a lot of junk out there anymore. There's a wide range of what you can spend, whether you go for, just the base nutrients for your plant, or if you want to go full throttle and do their whole line. That can be a difference of $100 a month or every couple months in newts versus $500 every couple months in newts. And sometimes it's even less with some of these powdered or salt-based nutrients they have nowadays. So, again, I encourage you to go to your local grow store, ask around. I personally use the Canna line of nutrients in cocoa, and the Cultivation Nation Fox Farm line of nutrients in soil. And I've had a lot of success with both. And again, I haven't heard of a bad newt line in a long time. So you really can't go wrong if your local grow store is selling it, or if you happen to hear it mentioned here or in another podcast. Those are going to be very, very safe bets. We've come a long way. To go over a few of those brand names to help you make your decision, I'm going to list some here that I have either personally used and know that they're great, or I have friends that have personally used them and know they're great. So like I said, I use Canna Coco. A lot of people use Canna Coco. You can make that one as expensive or as cheap as you want, just depending on if you buy the additional nutrient bottles that they have available in addition to your base A and B, which can still grow you great plants by itself. But if you're trying to grow the best that you possibly can and you get the whole nutrient line, that one's going to be pretty expensive. And then that's obviously a cocoa line. It's called Canna Coco. Then we move on to the Fox Farm Trio. This is a very common nutrient line again. This one is for soil. And again, if you stick with those three that come in the trio, it's very affordable, but then they also have a ton of extra bottles you can buy to enhance your grow and make it as expensive as you want. For one that works both in cocoa and soil, if you're trying to do both, but you only want to buy one newt line, some options are General Hydroponics, Botanicare, and House and Garden. And then a couple others that are soil only that I've heard good things about are Roots Organics and BioBiz. Now, when it comes to these nutrients, a lot of what I consumed when it came to cannabis growing education, when I first got started, they really hammered the point that make sure you don't use the recommended feed schedule. They always overdo it. That might have been the case back in the day. I have not found that to be the case today. You'll hear only use half of what the manufacturer recommends, or even a quarter. And I took that to heart when I first started, and I got yellow plants. Now, obviously, a million things could cause yellow plants other than nutrient deficiencies. But as soon as I brought that EC up, that measure of concentrate of the nutrition or the nutrients in the water, once I got that up to the recommended level of the manufacturer, I got beautiful green, dark green leaves and plants. I haven't grown with every single nutrient line in the world, so take that with a grain of salt and look at recent reviews from whatever nutrient line you are currently or deciding to currently use. And they likely will say, hey, I burnt my plants at full nude schedule if that happened. If you got rave reviews, likely that feed schedule is going to be just fine. Maybe just dial it back 10% from when the recommended is and go from there. I found actually nutrient burn to recover from easier than nutrient deficiency. And that's also going to be contrary to what a lot of folks say. But that's been my experience. And so that's all I can speak on. But again, most folks are going to say, dial it back. You can always add more newts. I've found that to be hard to recover from. Plant kind of struggles throughout its life if I don't get it going on the right feed schedule early. So hopefully that provided a few options for you that you might recognize when you're searching online or at your local grocery store. And hopefully that closes the loop on my nutrient thoughts from the previous episode. The other thing that I wanted to close the loop on that I didn't feel I did a good enough job explaining last week when I touched on it was picking your different strains. We talked about the different types of seeds out there, your regs, your autoflowers, your feminized seeds, etc. Actually, I don't know if that's etc. or not. Those are the three I know. But anyways, I digress. When you're picking different strains, what I've always done is look for ones that are known to be easy to grow. Why not? There's so many strains out there that there's no reason to not always be growing some bomb genetics. Okay? 2018 Farm Bill, which touched on hemp, also touched on cannabis seeds. They made them legal for transporting across state lines, to ship in the mail, because it's under that threshold of 0.3 THC. So, free market has created an unbelievable amount of genetics, seed banks, companies that we can choose from. There is no reason to not grow good genetics. Pick something that's hardy, pick something that grows easy, pick something that sounds fun. Pick whatever you really want in your strain. Because there are, again, a million strains out there. And you can tailor whatever strain you pick to have whatever desired effects you want. And you most certainly can find a strain that has your desired effects that also has the characteristic of being easy to grow. 2024, we should be finding strains that are easy to grow. So those were the two subjects that I wanted to touch on that I feel like I didn't do a good enough job on last week. And again, let me know what I messed up. Contact mccpod@gmail.com. And without further ado, I am very excited to get to our listener question segment. Subject: light schedules for autoflowers. Hi, Steven. I'm growing autoflowers for the first time, and I am a bit confused about the light schedule. Some people say 18/6 is best, but others say 24/0. What's your take on this, and does it really make a difference in yield? This is a age-old question. The deal with autoflowers is you do not need to dial the light and darkness schedule down to 12-12, where you have 12 hours of light and 12 hours of darkness to make the plant go into flowering. So what autoflower growers have learned is that they can keep the lights on for 18/6, let's say, for the entire grow, including when they're in flowering. And that extra photosynthesis, I guess, is giving them bigger buds. Now, there are a lot of autoflower growers that have upped that to running lights 24/7. No dark period. I did a lot of research on this when I first started growing autoflowers, so it might have changed since then, but at the time, the research was showing that the 24/0 light schedule, while they're getting that 24-hour-a-day photosynthesis, the increased yield that you get might not be worth that extra electricity bill for running your lights all the time. So what I actually ended up doing is I chose a place somewhere in between there, and for my autoflowers, I run them at 20 hours of light a day and 4 hours of darkness. So a little bit more light than your average traditional light schedule, and then we keep that all the way in through flowering, because I'm going to save a little money on electricity. I might not get the maximum yield possible, but your cost per watt of energy you're using isn't worth it to run at 24/0, in my opinion. Now, I know there are people that are growing in really cold climates, and they need to run 24/0 for their autoflowers just to keep it warm. It gets too cold with the lights turned off. And if that's your scenario, then that's the way you got to do it. All right. Managing humidity. I'm struggling with high humidity in my grow tent during the flowering stage. I'm already using a dehumidifier, but it's not bringing down the levels enough. Do you have any tips? And I'd like to do it without breaking the bank. Yeah, I'm sure you already had your dehumidifier before my last episode came out, where I mentioned that the dehumidifier is something that it seems like all of us have to go through once, where you buy a small dehumidifier. You think, this is just a little room, my little grow room. I just need a little dehumidifier. We'll be good to go. What we don't realize is how much moisture the plants themselves are giving off. So we're not just trying to dehumidify the normal climate. These plants are going to be giving off a ton of moisture. So we're going to have to get a nice dehumidifier if we are going to get that RH down to an appropriate level during flower. And that's just the way it is. Like I said, buy once, cry once. And I am guilty as everyone else. I had a small one when I first started and didn't do the trick, and now it's in the closet. And I think I mentioned this last episode, but I have the Medea something or other, and I think it's good for 1,500 square feet. And again, you're going to need one that's rated for way more square feet that's in your grow room than what's in your grow room, because, like I say, the moisture coming off these plants is crazy. So unfortunately, you're going to have to break the bank, but yeah, it's just going to have to be part of it, I guess, unfortunately. All right. Got a couple more in here still. This is a good one. Flushing before harvest. I keep hearing about flushing before harvest is bro science. Do you agree or disagree? So what this emailer is talking about is there's an idea that at the end of your grow, you should run a ton of just plain water through your medium to get rid of nutrients that might have been built up in the soil and or cocoa. And then the idea is this will leach out nutrients from the plant, resulting in a better smoke. So this is like debated like crazy if you go online or talk to anybody about how they grow. There's a lot of strong opinions on it. There's a lot of anecdotes out there that say it just tastes way better when we flush. And flushing causes the plant to do things like stress that causes those buds to get more resin on them. And there's other people that will cite studies that they've actually done where they can't find any difference in the plant and the final smokable product between a flush plant and a non-flush plant. In fact, they actually, I believe, in these studies do mention that the final product is actually better in the non-flushed plant than the flushed plant. And it's such a crazy topic because, again, if you search around online, time after time after time, you will find people that will do an A/B test, one flush, one non-flush plant, and they will like the plant that was flushed, despite these studies. So I actually do flush. I do flush, despite it being probably bro science. Maybe it's placebo effect that I think my final product tastes better. But I also think there's something to be said for the stress that the plant gets from receiving only water at the end, causing those buds to swell. Don't ask me the science of why. I just know what I see. All right, we got time for one more question. Let's grab this one. Odor control for indoor growing. Hey, Steven, I am growing indoors and worried about the smell. I have a carbon filter, but it doesn't seem to be enough. Do you have any other recommendations for controlling odor in a small apartment setting? Yes. First off, make sure we're getting that negative pressure in your tent. And what I mean by negative pressure is we are sucking in the air through whatever holes you might have in your tent, and then it's getting pushed out at all times through your carbon filter. Without that negative pressure, some of your smell is going to leak out of some of your holes in your tent where your cords are and all that, and your air vents. So we have to make sure that we're maintaining that negative pressure. And so long as you have a good filter, this will actually take care of 90% of it. So I'm guessing that you don't have negative pressure, but email me back and let me know. Other things that I do, I sometimes, if it's getting really bad, I will, where it's even smelling out of the filter with the hose, I actually have an extender on my hose and I'll pump it right out a window. So that's an option there. It's really cheap to get that like 6-inch ducting that can go into your 6-inch inline filter. And that was a good option for me in one of my bigger grows that I had. I don't do that many plants anymore, so I don't anticipate having to do that again. But in an apartment setting, if you're on the top floor and you can aim it up, you're probably okay. But other than that, you might not want to do that. So that might not be the greatest recommendation for you in particular, but just keep that in mind as an option. And then what else do? I have a air filter, an air purifier, I should say, in my long room. And then I have one kind of outside of my long room as well. So if I know I'm having guests or whatever, and I'm in a place where it's legal, so it doesn't really matter, but just to be nice and not have it smell, I have that running. I have one running in my grow room and then one running right outside of it. So between those two and then my filters, I really don't have any smell, which is really cool. I mean, again, this is something that's hasn't always been the case, but with the technology that we have that's affordable, we can really do some cool things without making the wife unhappy. All right. I like to save the cannabis news for last because if you're listening to this sometime in the future, hopefully weed is legal in the entire world and this will be irrelevant to you. But for those listening to this in the present, it certainly is relevant. Over in the US, We have a presidential race coming up, but it looks pretty positive either way. I did some research before coming on here about both candidates, and we know that Kamala Harris got in trouble back in the day for her hard stance against pot and locking up weed offenders over there in California, in the USA. But she has definitely come around and changed her mind on that topic, and hence her getting in trouble. And I just want to say, we have no political affiliation. We do not pretend to know enough to have one to recommend you to do anything. We're just relaying the news so you don't have to look it up. Simple as that. All right. And I say both candidates are looking pretty good when it comes to marijuana because, like I said, Kamala has changed her mind on the topic. Her VP pick that she just made a few days ago legalized marijuana during his term in his state in the USA. But then on the other side, Trump is actually expressing an openness to decriminalizing marijuana. This was actually just today, 8/8/24, August 8th, 2024. He was asked by a reporter whether he supports legalizing cannabis, and he said many states have already made a non-medicinal marijuana legal. And he said, quote, "As we legalize it, I start to agree a lot more because it's being legalized all over the country," Trump said. So, kind of cool. Again, no political affiliation, just relaying the cannabis legal news. In other tangible news, more tangible news, I should say, rescheduling. That's been a hot topic for a couple of years now. There was a public comment period that people in the USA could send in their comments and concerns to the DEA about the proposed rule to reschedule cannabis from a Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 drug under the Controlled Substance Act. And they had 43,000 public comments that were submitted. No word on if they're pro or against, but that's a whole heck of a lot for the DEA to get through. So when can we expect change? And I found this article just published today from the Cannabis Business Times. Shout out to author Noel Skadinsky. And while they don't give a exact prediction on when we're going to see rescheduling, they do think that because of the election cycle that we're in, this rescheduling process, for whatever reason, is going to be done a lot more quickly than the 5, 10, or 15 years that other drugs sometimes take for review of their schedule with the DEA. So I could be wrong, but to me, that sure sounds like it's going to be done before November, whatever the election day is, 2024. So for you folks over there in the US, seems like it's exciting times. In other cannabis news, a lot of stuff coming out of Thailand. In 2022, they made it legal, and it's been in the news a lot lately because some politicians are trying to make it illegal again. So I'm going to read this article by Nico Vorobiev from Salon.com. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he mentions on June 9th, 2022, Thailand made history as the first Asian nation to lift the ban on cannabis after decades of prohibition. The plant was removed from the list of dangerous narcotics, and although casual consumption technically remained off limits, nobody, not even the cops, seemed to care. Thousands of prisoners were set free that very day. It was de facto legalization. Then, Thailand threatened to revert course yet again. The opposition made cannabis a wedge issue in last year's election, and having stepped into power, nearly backtracked on the reforms that made the Thai kingdom a pioneer in Southeast Asia. The initial euphoria quickly gave way to a moral panic. It may have once been a tradition, but millions of Thais had nevertheless grown up only hearing that ganja is a dangerous drug, conflating cannabis with stronger drugs like meth, and the new 420 friendly climate left them uncomfortable. Reefer madness reemerged in the press, such as a March 2023 case in which a 23-year-old Bangkok man was admitted to hospital for a marijuana overdose. We all know that's not real. During which he crashed a stolen ambulance. I would guess he had some other issues going on. Part of the problem was lawmakers were too hasty in pushing ahead legalization without regulation, leaving a wide open goal for both prohibitionists and the opposition eager to score easy political points. Just this last summer, the government survey claimed 80% of the population wanted a repeal, and a committee convened in early July 2024 to ponder the matter. It was a close call. On Tuesday, July 23rd, now Deputy Prime Minister something announced that criminalization was called off. Instead, the government agreed to go forward with regulations and would hold meetings with relevant stockholders. So as a consumer of cannabis news, I really thought that Thailand was going 100% back to making it illegal. That's what all the headlines were saying. That's what the articles were saying. But now it's looking like we didn't lose Thailand back to prohibition, which is great. You know, we'd all prefer that they regulate cannabis no different than tomatoes, but we'll take what we can get, won't we? So good news for our friends in Thailand. Banana. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Marijuana Cultivation Cannabis Podcast. Man, that's a mouthful. So glad you were with us. And let me know what I messed up at contactmccpod@gmail.com. Also send in your listener questions. I'll do my best to answer them on the pod, but if not on the pod, I will certainly respond via email. And for the questions that really stump me, we can get listener feedback on them as well and kind of make it a community deal. Excited where this is going, excited for the feedback I've gotten so far. Thanks for being part of this new community and this new journey. And I think it's going to be sweet.